All right, that's it, mate. We are live. I don't know how many people are going to join us, but Bryan Lundquist, how you doing, man?
Cheers, man. Thanks for having me. My quads are dead, but everything else is good.
Jeez. Mate, why are you running an Ironman? What on earth? I mean, that's just my perspective. You give me yours.
Well, I mean, I guess like you've got pro athletes like Tony Kanaan and Dallas Clark from the Indianapolis Colts. He's a tight end in the NFL. He was competing this year. So every once in a while you have these athletes from other sports crossover. But of course, like anybody who comes from a swim, bike, or run background is sort of got an inside line to triathlon.
Yeah.
And I had been curious about doing tri for pretty much my whole swimming career, but I ran cross country in high school. I had sort of thought, hey, like this is something that I'd love to give a shot. And one of the first things that I did, kind of after swimming was get a bike and do a local tri. And then I ended up working for a bicycle company for years. So it was just kind of a natural fit. But I mean, you and I were pure sprinters. So like, I mean, it's such a stark contrast to get ready for an event that's hours long versus, having traveled around the world to swim 22 seconds. You know what I mean?
I distinctly remember a time where we went to Florida State, and I remember you swam so badly. I was like, Bryan, have 4 days off. Like you look terrible. And I remember just giving you like 4 days. And you were like, you want me to swim? I was like, no, 4 days just off. And then you came back like 4 days later and you looked pretty good. And it was like, this is preparing for a 50 freestyle. And here you are now competing for, 10 hours. I'm like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Well, that's like, I was a heavy taper, dude. Cause the fastest I ever went in a Speedo, in a brief and a dual meet, it was 20.6. And then that week, 10 days later, or whatever it was before SECs, then I went 19.6. And then, a month later went 19.1. So like, that's crazy. Yeah. But taper is different. There's still taper, but especially if you're lifting. And the last build that I did, I was lifting because there's a lot of like posterior chain stuff that you need for long distance. And the things that were the most sore for me were War Eagle to that guy, by the way. I think like my back, when I was finished, my quads were done, but my back was really sore too. So, or just like totally dead from being bent over the whole day and then running a marathon. So
all right, we got a lot to talk about before we get to the finish line. So let's first of all, we're talking about Kona, right? So Kona was on Saturday. They had the women's race on Thursday. I think it was the first time in Kona's history where they'd split it. So they had the women up front on Thursday, which was an epic race, by the way. I want to ask your opinion on that and kind of how much you watched that. And then they had the men's race on Saturday. So tell me, they mix amateur and pro together? Is that what they did?
Yeah, that's what's so cool about triathlon and Ironman events in particular is the age group field is always racing when there's a professional field. There's some races that don't have a professional field, but a lot of the Ironman events have a pro field, and the pros go off first, and then the age groupers just chase them. So we went.
Like, do they get a head start, or is it the same gun? Everyone's lined up together.
No, they let the pros have their own start. And they've always had the pros have their own start, but in Kona they used to do a mass start with all the age groupers. But the problem was some people died in the water, or they had to be rescued because it was so chaotic, because they would just have 2,500 people in the water and a gun goes off and boom, they're gone. So I mean, there were still I had 419 in my age group or something like that started. Man. And everybody was in the water at the same time for the swim, but it was just the age group that I was in, which was 35 to 39. So yeah, the women were on Thursday, men on Saturday. It's the first time they've ever split the two up. And the reason they did that, they tried to spin it that it was about giving attention for the women's race, which is true. The pro women never have a clean runway to be at the very front with an empty highway. They always have men in front of them, and they always have the top age group men also kind of scattered amongst the field. So there was an opportunity for sure for the pro women to have their moment. I think there was kind of mixed vibes between the pro women, whether or not that was a good thing for them, because a lot of the pro athletes who are from Europe, then it was on a weekday. So a lot of the sponsors and public, like they were working, so they couldn't actually watch them. But the predominant reason is because some people qualified for this race in 2019. So normally it's one qualifying year. Everybody goes to the World Championship, but they didn't have it the last few years. So you had a lot of pent up, athletes who were waiting for their shot in the sunlight.
But it sounds like it was so successful, they're going to keep it this way now. The women's, look, honestly, I watched the women's race. I thought it was cool that they had their own little show and spectacle and were out there. I mean, they raced hard, dude. They were tough. There's some good racing going on in that, which then led me to believe, like, all right, if the women's race was that good, the men's race is going to be epic too. So it certainly ended up that way. Now, from what I understand, that it's an island, so they shut it down for the day predominantly. So you can't really. There wasn't much riding going on because the women's race was going on. So like, was Thursday a shock to you in terms of like, were you feeling like you needed to train and get out that day and you couldn't, or how were you feeling? Were you anxious?
Definitely anxious, but how can you not be anxious before you're about to work out for 9 hours? I mean,
I've never done it, so I don't know.
Dude, it's so, but it was definitely an additional variable to have to figure out. And I where we were staying, we were about 20 miles up the coast, right on the bike course basically, but there was a little village that I was able to ride around in. I basically just like ran back and forth on this road, or rode my bike back and forth on this road for an hour. But by that point, I'm like pretty deep in taper, so I didn't need to do much that day. I was expecting to not have to do much. I did try to go for a swim the morning that the women raced at this local aquatic center and got turned away. So, it's just some things don't go to plan during taper. You got to be adaptable, and especially when you travel to race, or this is still in the US, but it is Hawaii. If you go to other countries, like, you got to deal with the food that you normally eat not being available and all that stuff. So but the women's race, yes, I watched the whole day. I was just stoked about the excitement and to watch it. I've always wanted to do this race for as long as I can remember it. I think I met Craig Alexander, as I told you. I was 3-time champion of this race, and I met him at the expo and had a chat, and just his racing was some of the earliest exposure that I had to this in terms of like following athletes, who they were, what sort of times they were doing. But I've always wanted to go do it. So being there for sure, I'm going to watch the women's race. I didn't want to stay in the sun, but I did go out and, cheer some of them on for a little bit, and then came back and kicked the feet up and just watched the live stream. But the pro women, they're so strong. First of all, they outride me on the bike by half an hour. And then the run pace, like I can run as fast as they run in a marathon, but I can't do it off of a 48 minute swim and a 4.5 hour bike ride.
Yeah. That's the thing. Like, I've done a triathlon before, and I was like, okay, I can swim, I can ride, I can run, but the combination slaps you in the face. You don't realize how useless your legs become after you've like swum, first of all, and then you're trying to run out, and you're like, oh, I'm trying to run here, and then you transition into a bike, and then you're slamming the bike, and then you get off a bike, and your legs just do not want to go. Like, they don't want to run. It's almost like a 4 a.m. I did a 4 a.m. once, long course, man. It was the worst mistake I ever made. But like, my body couldn't transition from, I can swim backstroke, breaststroke, butterfly. I can do all the individual stuff, but like when you combine them together, you don't realize what a slap in the face it is, hey?
Yeah, you got to get used to the rubber legs when you first get off the bike, and you can't judge anybody too by how they're running when they first get off the bike. I actually have a harder time with the swim to bike transition. I've done so many races where there's guys who just hammer the first part of the bike, but for some reason my legs just don't want to go, and it takes me a bit to settle in. But bike to run, like, I can train the bike and my run feels good, and normally I feel pretty good running off of the bike. I'm not really sure why that is, but that lasts.
You train transitions like in IM, you would train transitions, I guess. Do you do the same thing in Ironman?
Some, not a lot. I think pros will train it more, or race tune-ups are really helpful for that too. That's part of the advantage in doing in-season races, is really just to get all the rest of the stuff dialed and the details. In a longer race, the transitions don't matter as much, especially in the Ironman distance. But like, you can make up a couple minutes, and sometimes a couple minutes can be the difference between qualifying, to go to a race like Kona or not. So I actually had some of the faster transitions in my qualifying race relative to the people in my age group, and that was like helpful for me to get a qualifying slot.
Talk to me about that in terms of, well, first of all, why did you decide to do an Ironman? Out of all the triathlons you could possibly pick, that's the one that seems the most ridiculous to me in terms of like, it's not so much the event itself. Like, I can understand how you could go to an event and you could work for 10 hours. Like, I kind of get that idea, but like, how do you train for something like that? I have no concept of the training that would go into being able to complete 10 hours in a day.
Yeah, I think, well, the why behind doing it is, I think, just because it has occupied this space in sort of Americana for a while and in the endurance community. And Ironman has sort of stood alone as a brand with, their events. And that being, I mean, the Ironman started because there were some athletes in Hawaii who they were trying to decide, was it a swimmer or a bike rider or a runner who was the best athlete? And so they had these existing races in Hawaii. One of them just happened to be a 2.4 mile swim. One of them was the bike, and one of them was the Honolulu Marathon. So they said, well, we'll just put all those three together, and and then we'll tough it out. That was the origin of all of this, and so that's why that event exists in Hawaii.
What was the first year of that? When was that?
70s. And so I think like late 70s, and then the race, so they started to, I think they brought it to the Big Island in Kona sometime in the 80s. So, but to train for it, it's honestly not too dissimilar from some of the shorter distances. Generally, the way the schedule works for me is 4 to 5 swims a week, 4 to 5 rides a week, and 4 to 5 runs a week. Now, everybody, depending on, how much you're working, you can adapt that schedule. My swims tend to just be recovery because I'm not going to gain much time having come from a swimming background. So I don't put a big effort into really maximizing the swim. Do I get in good fitness swimming? Sure. But that's the least important. The bike riding, I over-invest in that. And generally amongst those workouts, it's, you probably do 1 quality or maybe 2 quality workouts a week and 1 long one. So the same for the ride and the run. So every week I'll do a run workout that's speed, that's up tempo, that's way faster than race pace, somewhere around 9 to 11 miles in total for the workout. And then I'll also have a long run, which throughout the season can be anywhere from 14 miles up to 22 miles, getting closer to the race. And then the bike rides will go from, an hour and a half of quality, pushing really hard efforts for short interval bursts for, maybe once, twice a week. And then the long rides can be, the longest ride I did this build was a 7-hour ride, and I did 102 miles with 10,000 feet of climbing. So, but everybody's a little bit different, but everybody needs that quality because, to compete well, you have to be able to push, good power. If you're just going for, the endurance aspect, I think no matter what, even to be able to make it through the long distance, you can't just go out there and loaf it. You have to have that combination of maintaining your high end as well as keeping the endurance. So similar to what we do in swimming, right? It's like you're going to still touch the weights, leading up to a big meet, but you'll maybe just do a couple efforts at 80 to 90% at 1 rep, and that's it.
Well, let's answer this question real quick here. So is qualifying for Kona similarly difficult for making Olympic trials? Is that kind of a comparison?
I don't think so. I think it's still easier to qualify for Kona. I think making the Olympic trials in swimming is still really hard, but I don't know.
Really? How do you qualify for Kona?
So Ironman has a certain number of slots. Like I said, normally there's 2,500 total athletes. Competing at that race. This year there were more because of the pent up demand. But normally what they do is they take like the total number of slots that they can have at the race, and then they look at all the events that they have throughout the year, and then they allocate a certain number of slots to each race. So I qualified at the Ironman in Des Moines in June. That race had something like 40 or 50 qualifying slots across
in your age group.
Across all age groups. And then what they do is they allocate slots to each age group based on the percentage of athletes in that age group in the race. So, popular age groups might have somewhere between 4 to 5 qualifying spots per race. And then some age groups that, like, say, women 70 to 74, not normally that many people there doing it. They might have one slot for that age group, and similar for like 18 to 24 doesn't usually have a lot of people at the iron distance, so they might have one slot available. So
right. Listen, man, I was watching it really closely for the first time, I guess, and maybe there's been some changes over the years, but when I was watching the bike race, I'm like, that's not a bike, that's a Ferrari. Like, like that's some real shit. Like my bike out there, like the thing that I got in my garage here is like $800. The thing that they were riding looked to me like it was 20 grand. Like, are these bikes just out of this world expensive?
I think the bike I was riding retails for 15, and like I said, I didn't pay that for it. But yeah, it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money. And is there restrictions on the bike? Like, is there people checking the bikes? Because some of the bikes I was looking at, I was like, that's legit. I mean, that thing can go. Like, I understand there's horsepower behind it, right? Like, you're working and you're probably on that thing for 6 hours doing that. But like that's a real bike, dude.
Yeah, I don't know if there is an inspection or a criteria for triathlon. I believe there is not.
Really? Yeah, even at that level, like at Kona, there wasn't someone inspecting your bike.
No, nobody inspected the bike there, but it's because triathlon exists independent of the ICU. Mixing things here, the UCI, which governs international cycling, and UCI rules are different for time trial bikes. So in the Tour de France, these guys are also for Tour de France Femme, like they're riding that same position, aero position. It looks very similar, but the geometry rules are different for those bikes. They have to be UCI legal, whereas triathlon is sort of a blank canvas. These brands can just make it super aero, and they all have integrated hydration. So my bike inside it could hold 1.6 liters of water. I can put my flat kit inside the down tube of the frame. I have nutrition, like gels in the frame. It's all integrated.
It doesn't seem fair.
I mean, well, the first time that I did a triathlon, I was right out of grad school, had just retired after the 2012 Olympic trials, and was curious. Got a bike, got a road bike, not anything high end, many years old. And I remember I was out first on the swim, and then I was getting passed on the bike, and everything, I just kept seeing these guys go by me. Boom, boom, boom. And every time they went past me, I just went $1,000, $2,500, $4,000.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
I guess you got to buy into this sport.
Yeah. No, that's what I'm saying. Like, they were talking about, all these guys breaking the course records, and they had like splits, obviously, fastest swim, fastest bike, fastest run, and things like that, top 10 bikes. And I'm like, it's not, horses for courses. It's not even Stevens here. Like, is the guy who's the best triathlete in the world, has he got the best bike as well? Is it that kind of like unfairness?
No, I don't think so. I think at that end, you're amongst all the top brands. Is there a fastest and a slowest? For sure. Is the difference negligible? Yeah. The slowest thing on the bike is the rider. So, and that's in terms of the motor, the engine, the human, as well as the position that you're in. So like if you're gonna any any advantage is coming probably not so much from the equipment, but if you don't have it, you can't play. Like you have to have an elite machine to be able to come in.
So there's no one at the finish line in the top 10 calling foul. Like, the only reason why he beat me is because he had a better bike. They're not doing that.
No, but I think carbon shoes had impacted that game a bit in the past few years for sure, as we've seen with world records and getting under 2 hours with Ineos 159 and Kipchoge.
Hey, what does that mean, carbon shoes? Tell the people that don't run like me. I never run. What's a carbon shoe? Okay,
so just like the swimming suit chaos and controversy and innovation that all happened around 2008 and 2009 with the integration of impermeable materials. Right. The running world has seen the same thing over the last 3 years with the integration of carbon plates into the shoe. And so what that does is it offers an amount of stiffness and a spring during the toe off. And it essentially launches you forward, and you can feel it pretty tremendously. And it's why, Eliud Kipchoge is, I don't even know if it's arguable that he's the greatest marathon runner ever. And he was featured in a documentary that Nike did in an event a couple of years ago called Breaking 2, I think it was. And so they set up this separate course for them to break 2 hours in the marathon. The world record's been, in the low 2 hours, 2:02, 2:01. It was at 2:01, and they were trying to get under 2 hours, and they were featuring a carbon shoe to get there. Nike in this is similar to Speedo in 2008, where they were the first mover, and then all the rest of the brands came in. So, so now you've got all the brands who have a carbon shoe, but that has for sure been, a piece of technology that's come into the triathlon world outside of bikes that, there's a noticeable difference if you're not running in carbon shoes.
So the carbon shoe's legal. How much are you putting aside for a carbon shoe?
Let's see, probably 180 to 280 bucks.
Oh, that seems like it's a normal price. That doesn't seem overpriced.
It's not crazy. Depends who you ask. If $280 is a lot for,
280, the top end of that, but like 180 seems like a normal. Like I've got these. Actually, I got these Noosa triathlon shoes. Look at those bad boys.
Oh, sick!
Yeah, dude, I got the Noosas on, and I never run. I just walk around in them. What was that? That's crazy. I didn't even realize that.
Those are cool.
Noosa but like, so all right, 180. So are these sold at a special shop? You can't get carbon shoes at just any kind of regular shoe shop.
There's probably some high-end running stores that sell them, but most of them you can just order them online from anywhere. I did check.
What's the top brand? So you got Nike, I guess.
Nike makes the Alpha Fly. They were kind of the first one. Hoka is another big one with the Carbon X3, and they've got another one that they use. And then really every other brand is in there. I think the biggest one in the triathlon community that's really popular is Asics. Asics has a shoe that's both really springy but also really stable. Yeah, they're I think it's a Metaspeed Sky is the shoe that they sell, and it's good for cornering. So, when you've got these turnarounds on a run course, nobody wants to turn an ankle, because if they integrate a carbon plate, the stack on the shoe is also really high. So if you're going to roll your ankle, especially as swimmers having super flexible ankles that are definitely susceptible to rolling your ankle. It's a dangerous game if you're running in these shoes with a really high stack height. So something to look out for. Sure.
Which let's go through the process then. So which suit did you swim in? Like what kind of suit, and which suit did you pick to swim in?
Okay, so I swam in a Blue 70 swim skin. Now, these swim skins that you wear, there's a difference in triathlon based on the water temperature. So in many races, especially in the West, the water temp is low enough. I want to say it's below 78 for age groupers and below 73 some odd for the professionals. They're wetsuit legal. So then the companies there are Blue 70, Roca, DeBoer. But then when it comes to non-wetsuit legal races, I think the water temp in Kona was 80, 81, something like that. And so for that race,
really that hot?
So for that, for that race, you wear a swim skin, which is what I would have called like a Farmer John or a Short John. They also make them that cover the sleeves, so you'd have a sleeve and then down to the knee caps. It doesn't go any longer than that, but it's a permeable material, and it's
so you float a little bit.
You float a little bit. It's really just like, to be form fitting, and it has has less drag than human skin does. So same reason we would have worn textile suits, back in the day. So
how much is that setting you back?
I think that suit was probably $250, something like that, 250, 300. So
terrible.
Yeah, not awful.
Okay.
Got to wear the standard issue latex cap, which fell off for me halfway through the race.
Really? Is that just on a disqualification or a penalty if you lose it?
No, I mean, I felt bad littering in the ocean, but what do you, I'll apologize.
Hopefully there's someone around sweeping up all the caps that fell off.
Yeah, well, if they gave me one that was exactly the color of the water, so they probably weren't going to find that.
All right, what kind of goggles were you wearing?
So I am partial to the Arena Sweetix goggles that back when we were training together, and Caesar was sponsored by Arena, and we were all wearing the Speedo Hydrolines. And I remember buying out every Speedo Hydroline that I could find. Bought those all out, and then in talking with Caesar and on our training group, we said, hey, like let's get Arena to make a goggle that's a combination of the Hydroline and the Tier socket rocket, and then Arena made the Sweetix. So I still love that goggle, but that's good. Roka's still really big in the goggle community too. Actually, I saw a few MP suits out there this week too.
Oh, really? MP had a little skin out there, eh? A little skin in the game.
Yeah, we did.
So how do you know you run out? How do you know where your shit is? Like there's stuff everywhere. Like how do you know which one's yours?
Brett, triathlon there's so much stuff you have to think about.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
I remember, there's so many races I've been to where you forget something, or there's just the list of things that you have to think about to bring is insane. It's way more than a swim meet for sure. But so a couple days, the day before the race, you turn your bike in, and there's an assigned spot in transition where you have to rack your bike. And so that when you rack your bike, they're all in number order and you're assigned a bib number. So you come out of the water and there's a gear bag that you grab. They've called your number as you're coming through. Grab your gear bag, run to the bike, change clothes if you need to. I didn't. I just put the sleeves up on my tri kit, take my wetsuit off, go to the bike, put my helmet on. It's already right there. Grab the bike and then start running the bike out of transition. So, but the day before, you're in there dropping off the bike and then visualizing what the transition looks like so that where your bike's positioned. What is my path going to be? Which aisle do I turn down so I don't have to get up there and ask someone? There's just a lot of mental prep that goes into that. You
weren't incoherent though after the swim of where am I?
No, I had a great swim and it was fun. I mean,
you came out first, right, in your age group?
Yeah, I came out first in my age group, and it just so happened that my age group were the first age group that they sent off after the pro field. And I think it's because I was in the biggest age group. And so that meant
so you're in the lead.
I was the first age grouper out of the water.
Did you catch any of the pros?
No, I didn't catch any of the pros. They started 15 minutes ahead of us. I think that if they started 10, I may have caught some. I have caught pros before in races, but usually the distance between the time distance is not so much, but that was a pretty big gap.
So you were first out of the water then?
Yeah. And in distance races like these, you talk to any open water swimmers, they're big in open water on, the takeout speed or the get out, which is a little different than I think most pool distance swimmers would employ. They swim, they dive in the pool and you settle into your pace. But in open water, because the draft component is so big, you want to get a gap. And so there's kind of a hole shot that happens. And so the first 50, 100, 200 meters are pretty strong. And then you kind of settle into a pace. And it just so happened that like I got 100 meters in and there was maybe one or two guys with me. And then I just pulled away from them. And then at the turnaround, I had a pretty sizable gap. So I knew I was going to be first out of the water, unless somebody just really back half the shit out of the swim. And that didn't seem to happen. So it was cool. I knew I was going to come into transition at the World Championship and be the first one out of the water. And everybody's so hyped. You've got a global community that's descended on a pretty small town in an island of Hawaii. And I felt like I was in the Tour de France or something. With all the crowd banging on the fences lining the course, and I was in the. Did
you have anyone there? Any family or friends?
Yeah, I had my whole family there, parents, sisters, nieces. Nice. So yeah, it was cool. And then there were other people that I knew who had either done the race on Thursday or were there coaching or supporting. So it was fun. Just
so everyone's fired up. You're coming out of the water first. Everyone's pumped up, ain't it?
Yeah, it was so cool. And like you do a little jog back through town and do a big out and back. And I was in the lead for most of that. So it was pretty neat. Honestly, I felt like kind of imposter syndrome, to be honest, because I thought of myself as a swimmer and not so much, a triathlete. I feel like I'm pretending every triathlon that I do. And I
I'll be like, that's it. I'm out. I won that one.
It was kind of like that. I thought, all right, I've played my card. Like, that's fine. But that was.
Is the announcer screaming your name, or are they calling number at that stage? Like 6:58's out of the water, or are they saying Lundquist is up first?
No, yeah, they're calling my name out. Yeah, they're saying,
that's awesome.
Bryan Lundquist first out of the water. Yeah,
that's gotta feel good. Yeah, that would feel good.
Yeah. No, I mean, it was cool. It was neat. And all these people don't have any idea who I am, but
yeah, but you're first out, so they're loving it. First out, man.
Yeah, it's so much fanfare there. Yeah, super cool experience.
How far off are you actually? How far off are you the worst pro athlete?
I finished in 9:54, and the worst male pro I think was 9:44. But that said, he was walking the marathon. So he walked a lot of it. I would say I'm probably an hour off of the worst pro, and more than an hour.
Significant.
Yeah, fairly significant. But I mean, there's also so many pros.
How many pros are there at that event? How many are on the starting line at that one?
There were like 50 to 55 male pros who started this race.
That's worldwide, though. That's not crazy, though.
There were not nearly as many women pros. I want to say their number was like 25 or 30. So that's much more reasonable. But actually amongst the pros, there's been some chatter more recently about concern over the lower end of the pro field not quite being pro enough. So, and the part of the concern over that is just that, you can get in the middle and race dynamics change, but it's people who don't actually have a shot at winning. It's kind of similar to how the Olympic trials in the US in the last cycle separated. They had, I forget what they called it, but you had the two different
the A flight, the B flight or something. Yeah,
it's the same thing. So I think triathlon is getting to a place where you've got some really elite age groupers, and they can earn their pro card. And once they earn their pro card, which normally you either have to do by being first age grouper overall at an Ironman race or in a top percentage, or you are within X percent of the pros finishing time. And if you do that, then you've basically proven, okay, I'm good enough to be a pro, right? Like if I can be within 8% of their time, then that's good enough to compete. So, but a race like this, it's the World Championship, so it is a little bit bigger. Not every Ironman race is the same size. So, with pro triathlon, I was going to say Pro Triathlon's done a good job recently because they've kind of unionized. They've created this professional organization called the Professional Triathletes Organization, the PTO. And the PTO, in a similar vein to the ISL, they're looking for a way to fund the careers of professional triathletes and give them incentives to come and race. So they have their own PTO races that have huge prize purses. Like the winner gets huge for triathlon. There's probably like $1 million or $1.5 million purse.
Is this where they're in teams?
No, that is the Collins Cup.
Oh, okay.
So they're not in teams for the regular PTO races, but there is a PTO championship race called the Collins Cup, where there are 3 teams. There's the Americans, the Europeans, and the International, which is basically just Canada and Australia, and and New Zealand. But they compete in Slovakia that is a team event. So,
yeah.
I think things they're doing to try to increase triathlon, like the ability for athletes to continue to be professional and make a career out of it.
Are these Ironman triathletes just racing Ironman throughout the year? Or are they running in other events, like shorter events?
Good question. Yeah, so they're not doing full distance Ironmans all year. Right. They mostly do the half Ironman distance, which is the 70.3.
Oh, right.
And they also do the PTO races, that Pro Triathlete Organization races. And those races are 100K long. So that's a little bit shorter. It's kind of maybe takes them 3 to 3.5 hours to do that race. And then the next shortest is the Olympic distance, which, at the pointy end of the field is probably an hour and 30, hour and 40 minutes for them to finish that race.
So how many Ironmen a year are they pumping out?
Usually no more than 3.
Oh, really? 3.
Yeah, and they've changed the qualifying criteria in the last few years for to earn a spot at the World Championships for the pros. And unless you're in the top few at the Worlds, you have to validate your spot, and you also have to qualify. So it's not like you just get a bye or a pass to get in. Only a few athletes get that. Otherwise, you have to go and qualify, and they have to get usually in the top 4 or top 5 to get a qualifying slot. So similar criteria to the way that I mentioned for age groupers. The pros, their age group is professional. That's their category. And so they just have a certain number of slots per race. So you have to go and finish in the top of a race. And then, but the good news is if you compete in a race against someone who already has a slot, then their slot might roll down to you because they still have the same number of slots allocated. So most of them don't do more than that. It's hard on the body to do more than 3 triathlons, 3 full distance. In fact, the athlete who people would say is the best male triathlete in the world right now, Christian Blumenfeld. He's the Olympic champion in Tokyo. He won this was a weird year because they had 2 long distance full Ironman World Championships this year because of COVID. So earlier this year, they had one in April in St. George, Utah. Right. And he won that one. But then he also was part of a triathlon version of Nike's Breaking 2 or Ineos 159, where they did a breaking. They called it sub 7, sub 8, and he was trying. They made everything draft legal. They optimized all the equipment. They did everything they could. Used pacers, but he did that race, got under 7 hours, and then also was getting ready for this race. So that made 3 big full distance Ironman races for him this year, and that's just a lot for 1 year.
Yeah, I saw he come in 3rd. Do you think he has any regrets with all the stuff that he did now after that, or is he like, that's the best I can do? You think?
I think he just had a day where it was like, he just wasn't the best guy on the day. He was competing against his teammate Gustav Iden, who has a list of credentials almost as long as his. And I think he just didn't have his best day. So I
gotta be honest, man. Gustav comes off a little cocky, like is almost like he's like, I'm the dude. Is that how he comes off?
I think, I mean, you could sense a bit of that, but actually I think most of the athletes actually really like him and respect him and think they are very respectful. I think it's confidence, but I think that I think he's that good and he's that confident that it's almost so in your face that it could be off-putting. Does that make sense? Where you're like, wait,
yeah.
But the difference is he is that good.
Oh,
So
he's good. I mean, he can run. He can run like a mother. You know, like he was like, it was almost like he knew. He was like, I knew I was going to catch him, and I was going to let him go. And I knew at some point I was going to put on the afterburners and catch him. So yeah, it comes across as confidence for sure, but there does seem to be a little cockiness as well. But I mean, that's okay. I mean, that's what you expect from a champion, you know.
Well, I think there's some Europeans who I've swam with and become friends with who the way that they characterize things or the way that they speak about things could sometimes come across as blunt, but
right.
they're just matter of fact. It's just a cultural thing. That's, you say it how it is, and that's the way that I read it, is that he says it how it is. And by the way, like, if you can get off the bike and run sub 6 minute pace for 26 miles, dude, in 85-degree heat and humidity,
you be as cocky as you want
on a hilly course, you're the world champ, man. Go, like, yeah, take it. It's yours.
Be as cocky as you want. Yeah.
I don't care.
I love his little Instagram post. He put something up about, something about winning, winning mentality of some sort, where he was like, I wish I probably find it actually, but he was just talking about being, like, just having a winning mentality. You know what I mean? Like, if you think you're going to win, you're going to win. If you think you're going to lose, you're going to lose, basically, kind of thing. So
those guys are really respected, and him and Christian together are, I mean, they're so far ahead. I mean, yeah, they came first and third, but I think if you look at their total body of work and their accomplishments over the last few years, they're so far ahead of what everyone else is doing, and they're kind of like Phelps and Lochte in a way, where it's like, well, hold on a second. They've just gapped everyone, and now the rest of the world is trying to figure out, what is it that you guys are doing? What are you doing differently? How are you training? And some of their training methods are pretty different in the triathlon world, where they are usually like almost full-time at altitude, but full-time sleeping at altitude. Sometimes they come down to train, but they're using lactate in a way that triathletes have never used it before, like every day and every workout, to make sure that they're staying under a certain threshold, because they're training to slowly increase their capability and stay at that same blood lactate. And that's impacted a lot of other triathletes to try to figure out what is it that they're doing. I mean, that's just one thing, right? But it's set the standard in a way that the sport hasn't seen in a while, and I think that's fun to watch.
What about you? What about a guy like you who's just competing for an amateur spot, but trying to compete hard and obviously you got goals. Your goals, you get under 10 hours, and you did that. So it's like, how do you come up with your training plan?
Yeah, well, I write my own, but I have had coaches in the past. In fact, I've worked and had a pro triathlete coach me before.
Really?
And I had formerly been working with Paula Findlay, who's one of the top female triathletes, and I stopped working with her because I crashed my bike last year and broke my hip and didn't know when I was going to be back training again. And then this year I just decided to give it a crack by myself, knowing that I've got enough people in my corner who can be resources. And, when you come from a background of endurance sports and training programs, you know how a season works, how periodization works. And so, I draw upon the swim background, the creativity and the workouts meshed with the coaches that I've had and the ideas that they've put in to come up with a training program. And I think that, as I think I told you, offline a few weeks ago, one of the things that I think that I didn't do well in my swimming career was be able to articulate to my coaches what was going on with my body, and make sure that I vouched for myself and made any adjustments to the training plan if need be. And so I do that in triathlon. I'm much better at listening to my body, understanding what my body needs, and adapting that. And sometimes that means, I have a plan for the day, and that plan changes based on how I wake up and I feel in the morning. If I don't feel rested, or if I don't feel like I should be going hard that day, then I don't. Then I, rest or take it easy and move the hard work out to the next day. So, and I think that that's just kind of how you have to do it. Also, when you're an adult and you have, a life, you've got to do things a little bit differently. Sometimes life just dictates that you're not free, or, your schedule shifted. So that's just kind of how it goes. Well, for anybody who's still watching live, we've lost Brett. I don't know what happened to him, but and I'm not able to see the questions. So unfortunately, hopefully you guys just hang on and we'll get some questions in when we can. You all right?
Did I disappear?
You all right?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Oh, okay. I don't know what's going on. This is weird. It just switched off. I don't know. So I set this camera up. I got this Sony camera, and I decided to try out this new system. And just decided to just stop working for a second. So that's the way it goes.
Oh well.
Yeah. I mean, I like the picture. The picture's nice, but yeah, I got to figure it out. So,
bummer.
Yeah, I mean, you run a podcast, you know what it's like trying to deal with all this shit. So, like when on your podcast, Social Kick, people listen to it. You bring people on and you talk about swimming and you dig into swimming, and you're sharing knowledge and information. So, and the idea behind it is same as my podcast is to kind of get people to, come inside and get an understanding of really what the best do, right? So like you do that for swimming. So when you're training for triathlon, are you listening to other podcasts? Are you trying to learn from other people like that?
100%. Yeah. And I mean, I do that across multiple aspects of my life, not just for, athletics, but it's definitely a hobby and something that motivates me to get the best out of myself. I think I just enjoy, I really enjoy the pursuit of seeing what my physical body can do. And so that's an interest in figuring out how to best do it. I listen to my former coach's podcast. They've got the #1 triathlon podcast. It's called That Triathlon Life. There's a few others.
Bigger than Greg Bennett?
Yeah, it's better than Greg Bennett's podcast.
I'm telling that. He'll get offended.
Oh, sorry, but you got to check it out. Yeah, no, they're really good. But
That's cool.
I think that if you're, sure, are there some athletes who go and figure it out on their own and are sort of pioneers on their own path and say like, I don't care what the status quo is? Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, a really safe method for figuring out how to do things well is to listen to the opinions and thoughts and ideas about people who are better than you at the thing.
Yeah.
And so absolutely, I listen to podcasts, and I've got, a few coaches and athletes that I know on text. And so I'm reaching out to them for advice on a lot of things. And I think the biggest difference, in previous, like when I first started doing triathlon to now, is not so much my athletic fitness, my ability to train hard and see those adaptations, but it's actually like race tactics and also aerodynamics and and nutrition, especially for longer distances like a half Ironman and an Ironman, where, you know, those things, like, you're working out for so long that you need to continue to fuel your body. And to do that, to know how to do it well, you need to understand your sweat rate and, you know, how many calories you need to consume in an hour, or, you know, for however long the race is going to be. And so that's been a huge learning for me. And I think have figured that out this season. That's probably been the biggest learning, to be able to get through the distance. And if I continue on the path of doing full distance triathlon, at least, or even the halves, you know, there's more learning for me to combine both the nutrition with, you know, the gains that come from doing, you know, hard training. So. For anybody still on the live stream, we're still processing some camera issues. All right. Looks like we've had quite the technical difficulties here trying to figure out things. So I think we're going to end it there. Thanks everybody who joined on the live, and you know, thanks for following Inside with Brett Hawk. And if you want to follow me and our podcast, you can check us out at Social Kick. And if you got any triathlon questions, feel free to send them my way. But thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.